Well, welcome everybody to our business network meeting here at the Climate Center. As many of you know, my name is Duran, and I'm a program manager here at the Climate Center. I work with Ellie and the others on Climate Safe California and many other worthy projects, including connecting with all of you wonderful people here once every 3 months. We are expecting some more people. So I just want to take a couple of moments to just reflect on the past year. Since it's been a year, just a little bit more since we all went into lockdown and everything seemingly changed. And yet, you know, did it really change? A lot changed in our personal lives, certainly. A lot changed in our professional lives for many of our organizations and businesses. There were a lot of challenges in the past year. But at the same time, some things didn't change. And one thing that didn't change is the rapidity and scale at which the climate crisis is upon us. And so the Climate Center has worked very hard in the past year from our various offices to address this scale, this crisis at the scale it requires. And that is Climate Safe California. Many of you are familiar with Climate Safe California. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a moment. But part of what we're really looking to do is, I'm admitting some more people here. Here we go. Hey, look at that. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to our breakfast meeting. Cecilia from Better World Group, nice to see you. Natasha, Bill Wolpert, nice to see everybody here. Thank you all for being here. And I'm going to keep my eye open. Here's Jeff Mathias from Synergy Solar. And so I just want to take a moment to thank everybody who's here for all you do, for everything that you've done in the past year to keep our organizations thriving at the best we can. It is a incredibly challenging thing to do, to work in the way we have been, and yet so much has been accomplished. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of those things. Climate Safe California has really grown in scope and scale. We have over 1,000 endorsements in our policy platform so far, and more coming every day. That includes businesses, that includes elected officials, including Congress people and state senators and assembly members, and many of you. And I want to thank all of you for joining. I also just want to recognize that as we grow our organization and as we grow our scope and scale, it's important that we continue to work with more folks from around California, up and down the Golden State. And that's one of the reasons you'll be hearing in a couple minutes from Cecilia Estelano, who works with our partners, the CEO of our partner down in Southern California, the Better World Group. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But before I did that, I just want to take a moment here, as we've got about 40 folks here so far. And I see Chris Johnson. Welcome, Chris. Nice to have you with us. I just want to take a moment to just recognize the scope of this organization. In order to do that, I'm just going to show a few quick slides. And give me just a moment. Here we go. All right. Oops. All right. So here we go. What is Climate Safe California? I just want to take a moment to point out that this policy platform is comprehensive, and it's going to addresses a lot of the things you're going to be talking about today: phasing out fossil fuels, nature-based sequestration. Very interested to see your slides on that topic. We're going to invest in community resilience, and it all needs to be funded both publicly and privately. And that also ties, Kat, to some of what you'll be talking about a little bit later and your work through Beneficial State Bank. I mentioned we have over 1,000 endorsements. If you haven't endorsed yet, please consider doing so. And I want to point out that this is a coalition. We work in partnership always. And so I want to thank our sponsors, many of whom are with us here today. Bodine, Calpine, Bloom Energy, Redwood Credit Union, Hobo Wine Company, big and small, from every sector: finance, agriculture, wine, Jackson Family Wines, recently rejoined our business network. Our newest member, Renewable America, we're very proud to have. Enphase, one of the biggest solar technology companies in the country, based right here in Sonoma County, is a member. Y Green, Soyland, Willow Creek Wealth Management. I can't name them all because there's too many, but I just want to thank you all. Our newest members, MCE, Bay Area Air Quality Management District, just joined a broad coalition of CCAs, are members of our business network. Guayaquil, that makes yerba mate in the rainforests of South America and sells it right here in the United States, an incredible company. Somo Village, Promise Energy, Terra Verde, Rick Brown, if you're with us, thank you so much. Redwood Hill Farms, they make great cheese. That's also part of solving the climate crisis, is eating well. Let's not forget. And all the companies, big and small, Blue Planet Energy, Chris Johnson, one of our newer members, and all of you who are part of this organization. We could not do it without you. Ken Roberts, I believe you're with us here today, Financial Pathways. All of these companies are all doing their part. Amy's Kitchen, Synergy Solar, Jeff Mathias, thank you for renewing your membership. We couldn't do it without you. Beneficial State Bank also is a member of the business network, as are all of these other wonderful companies and organizations. So before we move, thank you, here we go. And before we move to our keynote speaker, who is going to be Kat Taylor, I would like to just take a moment to introduce Cecilia Estolano. Cecilia is the CEO of the Better World Group, and she's going to be spending a few minutes talking to us about the work that they do in policy. Better World Group has been a leader in policy for a long time. I believe some of our guests who are with us were invited by Better World Group, and we're very happy to have you here. Cecilia, your bio is long. A regent of the University of California. You've been on so many boards. I don't want to take time away from your presentation to go over your bio. I will note that you went to a couple of decent schools though, Harvard, UCLA, and the UC Berkeley School of Law. So impressive credentials. More importantly though, we're very interested to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you for 5 or so minutes of conversation about policy in California. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for the introduction. And it's really a pleasure to be here joining you. We've really enjoyed partnering with Ellie and the team on a number of issues. So like many of you, I own a business and I'm committed to making sure that we have a future that's safe for the next generation, that's worthy of the next generation. So we're committed to prioritizing climate and clean energy goals, not just for California, but for the world. We know that this marketplace here in California is setting the pace, but we have to do more faster, safer, and it's really a challenge. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Kat Taylor's keynote. I'm excited to hear about what you all are up to, particularly in making sure that communities most in need in California have the access to capital they need to rebuild this economy. So I want to tell you a little bit about Better World Group. We've been around for over 20 years. The founder was a fabulous woman named Wendy James, who I knew back in the days when I was a policy advisor to Mayor Tom Bradley when I was a child. And Wendy was working at Southern California Edison on electric transportation. But Wendy created this amazing organization that has led on issues, climate issues and clean air issues for decades now. So, you know, some of the stuff that we've done recently, you may have seen, some of you, we did a forum, I think it was only last week, though it seems like a long time ago, featuring the new chair of the Air Resources Board, Leanne Randolph. We had California Energy Commissioner Patty Monahan. We had Cynthia McLean-Hill, who's the president of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, a critical player in climate. And then we had Mary Leslie, who sits on the CalISO and is also the head of the LA Business Council. And it was a really great conversation. So we don't just pull together neat convos, we actually do a lot of policy advocacy, and we try to operate at the intersection of business, environment, environmental justice, racial justice, labor. We know that the only way we transform this economy is by a big tent, everybody being a part of it and everybody understanding their role. So we are always about coming up with bold, transformative ideas, but grounding them in real life. So we don't just talk about just transition, we talk about the workers and how we're going to make sure workers are safely accommodated, whether it's through retirement or through real jobs. So that's kind of some of the stuff that the meta work that we've done. So since I took over the company a couple of years ago, we've tried to strengthen our practice in racial justice and environmental justice and our links to the labor community. If those of you working in California policy know that sometimes our labor friends actually are the biggest obstacle for us to take that next step. We have to have those conversations directly, and that's what we do every day in our policy advocacy. So most recently, we've worked on developing and executing communications and policy strategies to get the successful adoption of the Advanced Clean Truck Rule. And it mandates the sale of zero electric vehicle trucks starting in 2023 and accelerating all the way to 2045. And that is a significant piece of work that's going to not only drive climate solutions, but also public health benefits and clean air benefits to the most disadvantaged communities. We've also last year worked on the passage of AB 841 and accelerated the deployment of hundreds of millions of dollars for electric vehicle infrastructure. Again, partnering with our labor friends, with our racial justice and environmental justice allies to make sure that that money is deployed in schools and places that need it the most, that have the fewest resources. And then most recently, we served on as an equity advisor for the recently launched Below's Electric for All public awareness campaign. It features actor and activist Mark Ruffalo alongside some local heroes that we wanted to elevate, like Mayor Ray Leon, who founded the Green Rateros electric vehicle program for farm workers, and Jackie Badejo and her mom, Miss Linda, who run Watts Clean Energy and are piloting an electric vehicle car share program in South LA. We need all of these types of ideas and programs, and we need them to go from pilot to scale. So we were really excited about elevating their stories. The last thing I want to note, because we hope you'll help us with this. This spring, we're working with equity, labor, and environmental advocates to run a campaign to support the governor's big, bold $1.5 billion zero emission vehicle budget. We're trying to get this across the finish line at the legislature. We'd love your support and your engagement. This is the type of bold step we need to take to get us to our climate goals. So about a decade ago, we founded the California Business Alliance for a Clean Economy. We wanted to show that small and mainstream businesses support climate action. And now we're focusing on expanding that outreach to Latino, Latinx, Asian American, BIPOC-owned businesses, women-owned businesses. When we rebuild this clean energy economy, it has to be equitable. Everybody needs to share in it. It also means that we can't have a wedge driven through us in the business community, so that we have folks who are not on board with the clean energy economy driving a wedge, trying to mobilize Black and brown and Asian businesses to fight against some of the bold climate solutions we need. So we're trying to build that tent, build a strong support base of entrepreneurs of color, women entrepreneurs, to support climate change solutions. So we're just excited to be here, really excited to hear about Kat's vision, and we look forward to partnering with all of you in the Climate Center. We want to make sure we elevate the voices of those who are about a new future. So thanks so much for the time, and I look forward to hearing the presentation.
Thank you, Cecilia. We really appreciate that. And we're very happy to be working with the Better World Group. Before I turn the reins over to Ellie, who's going to introduce Kat, I just want to mention two things. One is that we are partnering with the Better World Group again on our next Climate Safe California webinar on clean mobility, which is happening on April 28th. And that's going to feature Assemblymember Phil Ting and a whole range of fabulous experts that we're working in collaboration to put together. You can find information on that on our website, Driving to 2030 with Speed and Equity. That is our presentation that we're going to be putting together. The other thing I want to mention is many of you have been to these meetings before, but not everybody. We have some guests with us. So I do just want to remind everybody the last 30 minutes or 20 minutes or so of our meeting will be reserved for you guys to speak. We'll have a peer-to-peer sharing opportunity. So if you are, I'm going to call on all the members who are here. So just give you a heads up. If you don't want to speak, do let me know. But anybody who's interested in taking about a minute to make a quick presentation on what's happening in your company or organization, please just drop a note in the chat. My colleague Barry will take a note of that, and I'll try to call on as many of you as possible so that we all have a chance to hear from each other. Because the reason we do this in meeting format, not webinar format, is we're all in this together. This is intended to be a conversation. So please, we hope to hear from as many of you as possible. If you're interested, please drop that in chat. So with that, I would like to turn the reins over to Ellie Cohen, my colleague and our CEO of the Climate Center to say a few words to introduce our keynote speaker, Kat Taylor. Ellie, go ahead.
Thank you, Duran. And I just want to thank you again, Cecilia and Ruben, for a great partnership. And please note that Ruben put in the chat a link to the fantastic webinar that Cecilia did last week. It was excellent, and I highly recommend it to everyone. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here this morning. I'm thrilled to introduce Kat. Kat Taylor is a truly unique woman. She is brilliant, visionary, and inspiring, and courageous in so many ways. She's also a great singer. More than most, she truly understands the link between business, justice, and environmental protection. In my previous role at Point Blue, I worked closely with Kat and her team at TomKat Ranch, which she founded to learn about sustainable land management with multiple benefits, including climate solutions. I was honored to serve with Kat on the TomKat Ranch Educational Foundation board in its early days to support a sustainable food system through ranching best practices, training, educational tours, scientific research, and school food and garden programs. One of the social enterprises that's part of TomKat is Left Coast Grass-Fed, humanely raising cattle and other livestock for the benefit of healthy soils, ecosystems, and our climate. Kat works tirelessly in service of restoring social justice and environmental well-being to build a more equitable and inclusive world. She is co-founder and board chair of Beneficial State Bank, a community development financial institution and certified B Corporation, whose mission is to bring beneficial banking to low-income communities in an economically and environmentally sustainable manner to change the banking system for good. We're honored that Beneficial State Bank is a member of the Climate Center's business network. Kat graduated from Harvard College also and earned a JD MBA from Stanford. She and Tom Steyer, her climate energy justice activist husband, have 4 grown children, each pursuing their one wild and precious life too. Please join me in welcoming Kat Taylor.
Thank you, Ellie, and good morning, everybody. I apologize, I have a bit of a hoarse voice today. Obviously, been talking too much. I really was very lucky to have Ellie as a partner, and we still have Point Blue Conservation Science on site as our science ecological monitoring partner. So thank you for the prior work, Ellie, and thank you for inviting me today. I feel very humbled. I know everybody on the screen today could be in my place talking about the amazing work that they're doing. So I come to you as a humble foot soldier, honestly, to talk about some of the things that we've tried over the arc of my, what I would call my re-education. And I see so many familiar and friendly faces on here, so I can't say hello to everybody, but hello, nice to be back with you. And Cecilia, thank you for what was a perfect preamble to my remarks, centering racial justice and equity at everything in this, everything we do. So I do have a deck to share, and awesome, thank you, Dawn. So here we go. And if it's okay, Dawn, if I just ask for next to advance it as opposed to my advancing it. And we can go to the next slide. That's TomKat. As Cecilia was so reminding us all, we really need to center racial and gender equity at the heart of everything we do, because we haven't got that right for over 400 years. We all know our troublesome origins in enslavement of Africans, native genocide and land persecution of immigrants and refugees, less than person or non-conforming gender folk, and in supreme environmental degradation. It is actually the way we prosecute our natural resource agenda. It sets off violence, oppression, and diaspora. So we have to get that part right, but always thinking of, next slide, please. How unfair our American dream game really is. I love this slide because I think it's at the heart of a push for reparations. That has been something, a dream for our country, too long delayed. And in its delay and denial, it itself perpetuates injustice. I will note today that there was a press release that Evanston, Illinois is the first community in America to enact a reparations legislation to return $400,000 to community members there who come from disinvested communities. Next slide. So I also think that there is a giant business case for environmental justice. This is Harold Mitchell. He is the community steward that presided over the incredible resurrection of Spartanburg, South Carolina. They parlayed a $20,000 EPA grant that was given because of extreme environmental justice in their community, 2 Superfund sites, 6 brownfields, and they parlayed that into $300 million of investment over the next 20 years. There is a report on Spartanburg that I highly recommend everybody take a look at. We can provide the link to that. Next slide. But my re-education also has pertained to the actions that we take and the motivations that we have. And really in centering Blackness, we attend to the Black-white dynamic that affects so many communities of color, women, non-conforming gender folk, because that it allows us to attend to why it is non-white groups have been so severely oppressed. Next slide. On our way towards addressing those injustices, we really had to try a number of strategies as we re-educated ourselves. And one of the first that we tried was to stop doing passive philanthropy. We still do a lot of philanthropy that I call friends and family based on recommendations of those we trust. And also because of sitting on boards of critical organizations like your own. But we also tried decades of creating social enterprises, which I think pertains to why it's relevant to be speaking today before you. We started social enterprises to be business actors at the heart of important critical systems, including energy, food, finance, philanthropy, politics, policy, and legislation. And some of those social enterprises were Beneficial State Bank and Beneficial State Foundation, which owns Beneficial State Bank. Next Gen America, which is, you can go back, Next Gen America, which is the largest youth mobilization voter movement in American history. Next Gen Policy, attending to policy in California as a microcosm for the country. Radical Impact, which is a triple bottom line venture fund, changing the venture funds for venture capital system for good. Bright Path Capital Partners, another sister venture capital fund. TomKat Ranch, a working ranch and learning laboratory to de-risk and broadcast regenerative practice. And Lefko's Grass-Fed, which is sales and marketing arm for regenerative agricultural products. Next slide, please. And we had many allies along the way. So we have supported those big research universities, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, but we also need to support our on-the-ground partners, such as Point Blue Conservation Science, the Advanced Energy Economy, mobilizing businesses for advanced energy, and the Center for Eco-Literacy, training our next generations in sustainable practice through public education. Next slide. So just to take one social enterprise as an example, Beneficial State Bank has grown to be 1.2 billion in assets, over 200 colleagues operating in branches throughout Washington, Oregon, and California. It is a B corporation and a community development financial institution, and it does operate on a triple bottom line of racial and social equity, environmental well-being, and financial sustainability. So it's important that it be able to compete in the banking markets, but also to create a new model for banking, to change the banking system for good. That means first and foremost to stop the harm. We sometimes skip straight to what are you doing to help, but we don't stop the harm in the banking system. There's no amount of philanthropic or governmental capital that's gonna clean up for that. So that pertains to divesting from fossil fuels, private prisons, extractive finance, from treating bank employees fairly with minimum wage and full benefits, and showing up for climate and racial justice proactively. So we don't do anything bad if we can possibly avoid it. And we measure our lending, our investment practice, our corporate practices to make sure that preponderantly we're supporting a new equitable and climate just economy. Next slide. And measuring, you can't manage what you don't measure, and it has to be real. This is not only important so that we know we're showing up right, and you will see that we insist that over 75% of our loans are proactively producing a beneficial society, and that none of them are doing harm. But it also pertains to our theory of change. We don't think that we are going to become the banking system. We are a small actor relative to the over 2 trillion in assets banks that dominate the system. But our theory of change is that if we propose this new value proposition, we will win consumers' hearts and minds to move their money for good. We will convince early adopter banks like Bank of the West to commit to divesting from fossil fuels and paying their employees at least $15 an hour, and that we will convince regulators that they should have ESG and SDG goals at the heart of their regulations as well. Next slide, please. An example of a program that the bank is pursuing is our Clean Vehicle Assistance Program. We know how important the transportation sector is. So we want to be sure that low-income individuals and families are among the first to be driving electric and hybrid vehicles. And we can do that through a grant program that gives them the down payment for those cars. And then we give them a high road auto loan on top of that. Next slide, please. This is a program that's small but mighty. It is supported by the CARB, of course. But California's goals for 5 million EVs on the road by 2030 is a bold one, but not even that is enough. And so getting financial actors into the picture so that the financing cost of EVs is lower than for conventional cars is an essential component of our agenda. Next slide, please. Awesome. So Radical Impact Partners, I mentioned, is a sister venture fund. And we're not just trying to change the model for venture, but to migrate $1 billion to our investment model over time to lead in a revolution in venture in general. It's really important because in 2018, to take one example, less than 2% of venture funding went to companies founded by women or minorities. And it matters a lot because of the choices that business founders make of how to invest our venture capital funds. So in 2018, the top 10 financings of companies led by white men concentrated in rideshare, vaping, e-cigarettes, and gaming. And the top 10 financing, admittedly at much smaller scale, but using it to great effect, by companies founded by women or minorities, was in healthcare, communications, and education. Next slide, please. And again, you can't manage what you don't measure. So we have very strong impact metrics on all of our portfolio companies. And we use those metrics to entice other venture funds into these deals. And that's part of the theory of change of migrating billions of dollars into constructive venture finance. Next slide, please. TomKat Ranch Educational Foundation is the nonprofit that runs TomKat Ranch. It has a mission to provide healthy food on working lands in a way that regenerates the planet and inspires others to action. And it does that through a variety of strategies. Next slide, please. So the point of regenerative agriculture, and these days we're beginning to call it restorative agriculture, is to capture the natural systems and cycles of our planet and work in concert with them in agriculture. Agriculture is the dominant way that we tend our planet, for better or for worse. And when we recognize nature's magnificent and diverse cycles, we can actually farm in a way that produces co-benefits, including greater economic resiliency. So this is a diagram of how nature naturally resequesters carbon into the soil where it can do us no harm, and out of the atmosphere and the oceans where it's causing existential problems in our time. Next slide, please. So this relates to a number of policy efforts as well. One of them is the governor's executive order, commonly known as 30 by 30, to restore 30% of our wildlands and marine areas to conservation, including working lands, in a way that protects and restores biodiversity, sustains economic sustainability for our rural economies, and puts racial equity and diversity at the heart of all of our activities. We do see water as a proxy for soil carbon. It's what shows up first when you're practicing restorative agriculture. And it's an important critical co-benefit on its own. So when soils are absorbing more soil carbon, especially durable soil carbon, their structure becomes crystalline and a natural holding carbon sink, but also a holding storage tank for water. This is important for greater forage yield, for greater biodiversity, and resiliency, and especially in a state that is driven, that has drought cycles chronically, and is a fire ecology. If we were doing a better job of storing water as well as carbon, we could knock back the catastrophic nature of a lot of our fires. Next slide, please. So these are the many aspects of regenerative or restorative ag that you might be familiar with, and includes also the tenets of restorative agriculture. So those for us are: understand your context, minimal soil disturbance through no and low till regimes and cover crops, maximum biodiversity above and below the ground, especially in our microbial communities that are the miners exchanging as their currency carbon for essential minerals and nutrients, prioritizing long-rooted plants like perennials, and reintegrating livestock into cropping regimes. Next slide. And I mentioned that we pursue several strategies. So the first and foremost is to de-risk, broadcast, and measure regenerative practice. But we also are very involved in big buyer strategies, the possibility of large procurement regimes to shift our food supply chain permanently in favor of racial, gender, and environmental justice, as well as economic resiliency. The current industrial food and ag system, as you know, contributes at least 20% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. It lacks and undermines racial and gender equity in agriculture. And it has destroyed our topsoils, which is really our most precious natural capital in the world, such that scientists estimate we have only 59 harvests left. When the pandemic hit, we also revealed many of the inflexibilities and frailties of the conventional ag system, as well as a shocking level of hunger before the pandemic, and now exacerbated, skyrocketing in many communities 8 times to what it was in the past. This number is out of date. It's actually 1 in 4 Californians experiencing food insecurity, 1 in 3 of them Californians of color. The Growing the Table is a program that we designed to attend to emergency feeding needs while supporting farmers by paying them a fair price for their harvest. We expressly target BIPOC, LGBTQ+ women farmers, smaller and mid-scale, who are practicing organic regenerative agriculture. It is our effort to bridge them into a larger market share of the post-COVID food economy. Next slide. So over the arc of our work, we did start out hot and heavy in social enterprises, and we have, I think, learned much from those social enterprises, and will continue to see where business innovation can produce positive benefit. We have done a lot of philanthropy, and we've taken a very critical eye towards philanthropy, because if you look at its results over the last 100 years, it actually doesn't have a track record, I believe, that supports the diversion of government tax proceeds that it represents. In particular, donor advised funds, which now amount to, I think, $220 billion of assets, have remained on the sideline even during critical periods like this past year, to too great an extent. We have to remember that every time a tax deduction is taken for philanthropy, it's diverting critical resources from society's activities like public education, infrastructure, and climate mitigation. So in our recent efforts at philanthropic reform, we are taking a look at the rules of philanthropy through the IRS tax code and through state conforming kinds of tax laws. And we've really decided that for our part, we want to not only do conventional philanthropy, but attend to what we believe needs to happen to restore communities from whom assets have been stolen for over 400 years, which is to shift assets to community control and ownership. So we created the Good Life Pledge, asking philanthropists to commit to shifting a third of the assets under their control to community benefit and processes and engagement and ownership. For our part, we've taken the Good Life Pledge, and our first commitment is to provide pre-development capital grants to 5 communities represented here in this list. Regenesis Project and Push Buffalo are actually our beacon communities. They are 20 years into their processes and have, as I mentioned before, leveraged philanthropic government and other capital to scaled impact in their communities to address environmental injustice and economic resiliency. But the other 5 communities have received pre-development grants of $100,000. And we've shifted as collateral donor advised fund assets of $1 million per community. Plus, we're going to recruit 4 other donors in each community so that these community leadership can prepare their communities for capital absorption and then take assets to the capital markets to access low cost capital, 1% and 2% money in a leveraged 4 to 5 times leveraged approach. Next slide, please. So during the pandemic, there's also been opportunities for some of our social enterprises to step up and step in. And we, of course, as a bank, we're very involved in the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, lending, doing nearly $300 million of loans to small companies. 33% were actually nonprofits, 25% owned and operated by women or minorities, 90% with 20 employees or less. And that was critical funding, but it didn't attend to another impending disaster, which is the tribulations of small landlords and their small business tenants from non-payment of rent. Of course, we support rent and eviction moratoria, but it kind of kicks the can down the road. The non-payment of rent is not something that any small business or residential tenant is ever going to catch up on. So we proposed to both the state and the federal governments a loan product that would allow landlords to finance the rent shortfall over a long period of time, which is the way to handle the short-term crisis, and to permanently forgive that rent for those tenants and save our small businesses, especially who are the critical lion's share source of our best jobs. Next slide. I hope I've given you at least a taste of some of the things that we're trying to bring forward in these amazingly critical times. I so appreciate this opportunity to share some of them. We learn so much from you and others to whom we get to present, and from the models and interventions that you're pursuing as well. And I will sing a short song, even with my croaky voice. I'm sorry about that. But this to me is a song that symbolizes our incredible responsibility to the future to the future generations. We've been entrusted with our planet and our society, and both of those need to improve for our future generations. Welcome to the end of being alone inside your mind, tethered to another, and you're worried all the time. You always knew the melody, but you never heard it rhyme. Outside of my windows are the mountain and the snow. I hold you while you're sleeping, and I wish that I could go. All my rowdy friends around accomplishing their dreams, but I am the mother of Evangeline. They've still got their morning, they've still got their morning paper and their coffee and their time. They still enjoy their evenings with the skeptics and their wine. Oh, but all the wonders I have seen, I'll see a second time. From inside of the ages through your eyes. You were not an accident where no one thought it through. The world has stood against us, made us mean to fight for you. And when we chose your name, we knew you'd fight the power too. You're nothing short of magical and beautiful to me. I never hit the big time without you. So they can keep their treasure and their ties to the machine. Because I am the mother of Evangeline. They can keep their treasure and their ties to the machine. Because I am the mother of Evangeline. Thanks, you guys. Sorry to croak like a frog.
Thank you so much, Kat.
You betcha.
Inspiring and wonderful presentation. I tied together so many things for me. Obviously, we're talking a lot about policy, but thank you for the song. And thank you for the mention of food and farmers. It reminds me of many, I would say decades ago, I used to dress as a giant worm and sing about composting to thousands of school children. So I don't know, it kind of brought back some memories for me. So I want to thank you for that. I just want to remind everybody that soon we're going to be moving to our peer-to-peer sharing. And I've noticed some of you have dropped a note in the chat. We'd love to hear from as many of you as possible. But before we do that, I just want to throw it open to the group. We have a great opportunity here with Kat in the room. If anybody would like to ask any questions, we have a little bit of time. So if you'd like to ask a question of Kat, just start waving your hand a little bit and I'll call on you or drop me a note in the chat. Erica Torgensen wants to know any chance. Erica, do you want to ask that question in person? Or you want me just ask it for you? Just ask it. Any chance Beneficial State Bank comes back to Santa Rosa?
Oh, it broke my heart that we had to leave Santa Rosa. As you likely know, the future of banking is somewhat up in the air because of technology and the pandemic. So people don't walk into branches too much anymore, and we have to figure out how to meet them where they are, and also to be able to hit the unit economics of banking, essentially, because it's a very competitive business. So I hope that we are still serving businesses and individuals in Santa Rosa community as best we can without a branch there. And I don't honestly know what the future will hold for how we do that on a continuing basis. And I just apologize that we couldn't make it work more permanently there. We are implementing video banking and some other technologies that hopefully will retain the personal touch of banking. And I know how what verve the business community has in Santa Rosa and parts thereof. So we'll be visiting you one way or the other.
Thank you so much, Kat. I do have someone here who wants to ask a question. We're going to do two of them. So I'm going to start with Jock Gilchrist, who represents our organization out of his office in Colorado. Go ahead, Jock.
Thanks, Duran, and thank you so much, Kat, for that presentation. I'm a policy analyst at the Climate Center, and thank you for the song too. It's quite a dynamic presentation. My question was around something that I've sort of struggled in understanding in the topic of regenerative food. One of the ways it seems to me to drive more farmers to adopt these practices is to, make it so they can receive price premiums for the high quality products they grow and for the carbon they're sequestering. but at the same time, this might make regenerative products more expensive. And so, in an ideal world, regenerative food wouldn't be something that just rich, wealthy people can afford. It's something that everybody could afford. That just seems like a tension to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, equitable access to good, healthy food, especially organic regenerative, is an issue we care a lot about. In Growing the Table, obviously, we're giving food away, but we also really support community supported agriculture models that have sliding scale so that more people can access really, really good food. There is an inherent problem in the system that we have over-subsidized conventional food, and that subsidy is massive and results in really food being too cheap from a price point, but too expensive from a health, climate, justice, every other thing you can think of. So we're pulling a lot of levers at once in regenerative food, not just emergency feeding programs that illuminate some of the injustices in the food system and the crazy subsidies, but also identify the pain points in the system. So where can we improve processing bottlenecks, transit opportunities, et cetera? One of the things I think will come out of Growing the Table is a neural network of networks so that these independent actors, and there are 70,000 farms and ranches in California, that they can remain autonomous, but get together for bargaining power, on inputs, for advocacy and lobbying, on good policy, for centralized services, and so on. It's really a time for a distributed network in the food system. And we're also working on policy measures that would help level the playing field. So we are supporting 2 new Farm Bill insurance products that would allow farmers to have crop yield insurance, much the way they do now, not for applying the National Fertilizer Recommends, which is our toxic cocktail, but rather for employing carbon farming practices under the well-established NRCS guidelines. So let's help them bridge into regenerative practice in a de-risked way. And ultimately, the best insurer for agricultural practice is nature herself. And then I neglected to mention in the big buyer strategies that we've worked with California school districts who serve almost 1 billion meals a year to shift their food supply chain toward regenerative organic products. So 89 districts representing 1/3 of those billion meals have committed to purchasing their food locally grown in California, minimally processed or preserved, maximally organic, regenerative, and prepared from scratch. And that just starts to scale the markets for that so that we can get the scale economies and efficiencies in organic regenerative that we know already benefit conventional. But the racial and social equity around food access is enormous. And that's why we're starting to change our nomenclature to use restorative agriculture to suggest that regenerative agriculture always has to show up deeply allied with racial equity and food sovereignty.
Wonderful. Thank you. Very good question and a great answer. Julie, if you're here with us, I would like to ask you to unmute. You have a question for Kat from Banker to Banker. Julie with us? Go ahead.
And hi, Kat. Thank you. Great to see you. As someone who works for a large global bank, how do you address speaking to mass audiences about how important it is where you bank if you care about climate change?
Yep. So we've been very much a part of all the Move Your Money campaigns at Beneficial State Bank. We're not ourselves a movement maker, but we attach on to all sorts of others. So Dakota Access Pipeline protest and the leadership there called on people to move their money is just one example. And I think $100 million of deposits left the big banks in the first couple of weeks of that protest. It is a massive system, and the biggest players are actually, they're much bigger, as you know, than just banks. In fact, their commercial lending is a really tiny piece of what they do compared to their role in the capital markets. And so we encourage people to bank with their values, to go look for CDFI banks, community development financial institutions, who by definition put 60% of their lending at all times into low to moderate income markets. That the GABV banks, Global Alliance for Banking on Values, that sort of have that kind of social and racial justice lens, as well as an environmental climate lens, towards banks that are starting to migrate, like I mentioned, Bank of the West, and also to show up for divest, invest movement work, because it's as important that where we reinvest as that we divest. So I feel a little bit like we're tilting at windmills, because the financial service industry is the biggest industry in the world. It's actually much bigger than oil and gas, and it's a leverage system. But that's the reason why it's so important to get it right. It's our original and most powerful form of crowdfunding. We just haven't awoken to our agency and accountability for where our money sleeps at night. When you lend your deposits and you are a creditor to even to the big banks, you are entrusting them to loan out at 10 times their equity base to activities. So they really, really matter, and you have the right to know. So the other thing we're calling upon is we're supportive of SASB, the Sustainable Accounting Standards Bureau, and they might be able to come back and force now that we have a new administration. But as part of the SEC filings on reporting material risk, and all the biggest banks have to do that, to say you have to report out on your climate risk, on your racial equity risk, everything else, so that your investors understand that and your depositors as well. But you can help me on the inside, Julie, because I think new bank leadership, hopefully, they show up at the climate COPs and they talk about SDGs and so on, but we really have to start reporting and measuring at the scale of the $2.5 trillion that many of them have as an asset base, that they're preponderantly in support of those global goals.
Thanks, Kat.
Wonderful. What a great conversation. We do still have time for a couple more questions. This is a great opportunity to have a chat together. So Allie Andrews, I'd like to turn to you next. You're one of the first to raise your hand, so please.
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Allie. I run a small energy development company in Fresno, and we work in partnership with disinvested communities to design renewable energy projects that fit their needs, and that ultimately that they themselves can own and have the control over. So what you were saying about like transferring assets and community ownership in the transition really resonates with what we're hearing. And I'm curious about when you were talking about the pledge and convincing philanthropists or maybe investors that community ownership, and that these communities that you might have donated money to like actually transfer the power to them. That feels like it's been a pretty hard ask for us when we're trying to raise money for a community that has no assets or track record. And I'm curious what things you have seen in talking to those entities in convincing them that that's an important step towards a just transition. What has been successful there?
Well, it's definitely a work in process, and thank you. You're doing God's work on that too, because it does cut against the grain of sort of American traditional values of like, which I don't actually think have served us well. The ones that extreme individualism and manifest destiny, and this idea of bootstrapping your way, and that any sort of asset or income reallocation is communism or socialism or everything else. So history is fighting us, but I think some of the concepts around this just make sense to people. That if a community doesn't control how it gets its energy, its farmland, a philanthropic base of assets, if workers don't get to participate in ownership in the companies where they are providing a huge part of the value proposition, if people don't have assets and they barely have the income to live on, the desperation is expensive for all of us. It doesn't make society run well, and we make some very bad exchanges in the face of desperation. So it's an uphill battle. It sort of makes people go, like, what? You're asking me to do what? But if you think about it, anything less is not addressing the issues. So when PayPal and other big corporates came out after George Floyd's murder and said, oh, we're going to invest, $400 million into Black-owned businesses. Imagine that if you were a small business owner. Would you want PayPal as an owner in your capital stack? Like, that would be scary to me, such a big corporate interest. And when in fact, what should happen is these big corporations, in spite of their belief that their only purpose is to maximize shareholder value, which is pure bunk, what would happen if they gave equity grants and allowed Black businesses to recapitalize their own businesses? And business assets are critical to community control and well-being. And I will say also, we don't want to accomplish this magical trick of shifting assets just to reconstitute capital in some other hands. It's that community control and ownership is super important. So we also have examined and underdeveloped our collective ownership models for businesses and community amenities. So just thank you for doing the work you're doing, Allie, because owning the energy systems in a distributed fashion is super important for everything as well.
Thank you so much. Great question and great answer. We got time for one, maybe two more questions, kind of depending on how it goes. But Rick Brown, I'd like to turn to you next. I think there's something that you wanted to ask Kat.
Yeah, hi, Kat. Rick Brown from Terra Verde Energy. I had the pleasure of working with your husband and Senator De Leon on the implementation of Prop 39. We helped about 70 school districts implement their programs, most in disadvantaged communities in the Central Valley. So really appreciate that work. And I did want to ask about the Good Pledge. We have a lot of local philanthropy here in Sonoma County. Is there a particular entity that's promoting the Good Pledge strategy with local community type foundations or family foundations that we can connect to? Because we'd certainly like to see that happen in our community.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because it is important to get the word out there and to have sponsors and hosts for this. If you think about it, it's kind of a new product for community foundations. They host a lot of the donor advised funds. This is an opportunity to say to a donor advised fund, for instance, pledge your DAF for a 10-year lockup against a nonprofit bond financing for a community organization where you want to see this kind of investment happen. During the 10-year lockup, you can still take the earnings off of that asset and contribute it to your philanthropies that you care about. You still get the capital appreciation off of it. And at the end of the 10-year lockup, if you choose to, you could just go ahead and donate the entire asset to that community. In the meantime, they're getting that low-cost leveraged capital, which they could otherwise not get because they don't have a balance sheet. They don't have the strength to get it. So we're working with the San Francisco Foundation, a community foundation that you probably know. They're very interested in sort of productizing this, and also with another DAF host called Greater Horizons, I think it's called, from Kansas City. And with the sort of early adopter donors, we're asking them to work with their DAF hosts to get the word out about this and be the trial donor to do it, just as we are doing. And I think it actually could become quite attractive to community foundations who need to regain their competitive advantage over commercial entities like Fidelity and Vanguard and Schwab, who have grown much faster and larger in the DAF space than the community foundations. But this is the sort of product that resonates with place-based, mission-driven community foundations and their donor base. So that's one of the theories of change we have, that how this could actually happen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, we've got a lot of questions. We do have time for one more. I would like to call on Peter Weber. Peter, you've been very patient. You've had your hand up for a long time, and I do appreciate that. I wanted to give you a chance to ask your question. Then we're going to move to the peer-to-peer sharing. So stick around. We're going to get to hear from each other, Natasha and Chris and others. I want to give you all a chance to update us on your work. But go ahead, Peter. You've got a question for Kat. You're on mute. You're on mute. You need to unmute. There you go.
Sorry. Kat, great presentation. Thank you for everything that you do. I totally support your triple bottom line approach. I want to get to net zero as soon as we possibly can, but it's going to take some time, probably 3 decades or so. And I've got a question for you about our cap and trade program. Isn't it in fact acting as a regressive tax? Isn't it you live in Fresno where I do. And isn't it the case that people with very low per capita income are having to pay the highest prices of gasoline, the highest prices of electricity in the world, or in the country, pardon me? Isn't there a better way to address the transition so that people at the low and medium income levels aren't penalized the way they are today, bearing a lot of the cost for our cap and trade policies?
So I wish I was expert in that, and I'm not, but I'm going to address what I can about that. I am very sympathetic to the argument that it has a regressive effect on people who spend a larger share of their household budget on gasoline and electrical bills. I'm a big fan of guaranteed basic income because I think for many reasons we have to address a national crisis, which is the underpayment of the American worker. We're not paying. If you can't make your ends meet on 40 to 60 hours of labor per week, then something's wrong in the economy. We can address it through things like universal basic guaranteed income, but we should also really work hard to elevate the wages and benefits of workers in the American economy so that they can afford basic essentials and not feel the pain of regressive policies so much. Ultimately, the idea of creating community assets like energy generation in your community so you don't get hijacked by large utilities that are not attending to climate in time and so therefore are paying more in carbon cap and trade and carbon tax penalties, and the provision of fully electric vehicles first and foremost in low-income communities so they can get off gasoline and get into renewably generated electricity instead. I think all those programs are super important, but there's no substitute for addressing climate now because ultimately the environmental damage of climate is going to hit exactly those communities the hardest as well. So I think we have an opportunity in the Build Back Better climate agenda of the Biden administration, and the sort of integration of a racial equity commission and the 40% of having to go to, that's really important to keep that point of view in the mix, that we can't once again overly burden low-income communities with not just the effects of climate, but the costs of cleaning it up and getting into an advanced energy economy. I wanted to say too, in all of the strategies we deployed, my hat's off to Tom Steyer, because I would have never thought that someone have to run for president, but it was really important to make sure that race and climate are always in the critical decisions around who's going to provide leadership for this country.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Barry has, go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something onto what Kat said. I think the investment in infrastructure and more equity is hugely important. I also want to point out that we believe that the carbon price itself is very important to redirect investment in the economy to low carbon sources. However, California mostly elected not to take that revenue and use it as dividends back to low income people. That is one thing that has been done in other jurisdictions and was done in a very small way in California. I'm not going to go into that right now because we don't have time. But Peter, I'd be happy to send you some stuff. There is actually national legislation proposed to do exactly that, to address that regressive tax impact you're talking about from a carbon price. So there are multiple ways to address that problem.
Awesome. And I've been asked to read one last question from our board member, Dr. Venice Curry. She says, thank you for presenting such a holistic approach to social, racial, and environmental justice. In Fresno, there are constant battles around land use in communities of color. How can climate justice warriors engage with communities to leverage climate concerns, public health issues, and economic opportunities to push back elected officials committed to dumping in communities of color.
Yes, including Darling Industries or whatever that company is called. Hi, Venice. It's so nice to hear from you again. Wait, I have to get your Hollywood Square box up if I can.
Turn
Anyway.
the camera on, Vinny. Anyway, carry.
That's okay. That's okay. So yes, I didn't address land. Thank you for bringing that up, and land use, and the opportunity that exists in a lot of public lands like water district land and school district land and everything else, because we have a crisis in affordable housing as well. And we do have pollution. When I was in law school, one of the professors taught us, I can't believe this, but thank goodness we have pollution because that's how we get affordable housing, which is not only a pretty wicked thing to think, but it gets the causation wrong. Low-income people don't move next to pollution. Pollution moves next to them because of low political power. And the communities that Denise cares so much about and comes from in Fresno have had myriad environmental disasters inflicted on them. Same for communities throughout the United States. Darling Industries is ostensibly an energy company that put a rendering plant right next to housing and community amenities and so on, which is totally improper and unjust. So I think the addressing the political power of low-income communities is really, really important. And electing people from those communities in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where there was extreme environmental injustice, they not only pulled down a lot of federal and state funding to redress, but they got their community members elected at all levels of government. I know you and your mom and your family have been very engaged politically, and there's no substitute for having representation at all levels of government, because critical decisions are made, for instance, at the county level around economic development plans. One of the things we're working on, and I put in my, always in my title that I use she, her pronouns, forgot to say that, sorry, but TomKat Ranch is on the lands of the Amamutsan people. And we are dedicated to returning those lands. Returning lands to Indigenous, Black, and Brown farmers is really important in terms of shifting assets. It's one of the most critical assets that we could shift, and shifting them into collective ownership so that forever it's the community that can decide what happens on those lands and make sure that it has community benefit to all and harm to none. But my heart is with Venice. I did spend 6 weeks living in Fresno. I love yes. And I think we're going to find out how to fix things and have proof points in communities like Fresno, maybe well before we do in the Emerald City of San Francisco, where I typically hang out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Kat, and thank you all for these fabulous questions and this great conversation. We're going to continue the conversation now by hearing from, this is actually one of my favorite parts of the meeting every time, where we get to hear from you, our members and our guests. We're going to start with you, Chris. I see you've been patiently waiting, Chris Johnson. Why don't you model for us how to do a fabulous 1-minute summary of what's going on at Blue Planet Energy, the company that you helm?
Thanks, Duran, and thanks everybody. Happy spring. Nice to see you, Kat. Powerful and amazing presentation. Appreciate that. And I definitely share the interest in getting the DAF money off the sideline into work and change. So Blue Planet Energy is a Hawaii-based company that's manufacturing clean energy systems, and I've got 3 quick updates for you. First of all, today, great coincidence with this meeting, we are launching a new product, the Blue Ion HI, which is the safest, most scalable, most robust battery-based system for home, business, and community resilience. We have some of our installers in this network, and so I'm sure you'll be on our launch event later today, but happy to share that. And we have also just opened up our California facility. So we have research and development and demonstration technology there. Really look forward to being able to welcome some of you there after this pandemic. That's in the East Bay. And finally, for our California commercial customers, we have a financing product for microgrids, clean energy microgrids, that is now available. So this is business, nonprofit, agriculture, pretty much any sector. No money down, instant energy savings plus resilience available today. So I'm Chris, blueplanetenergy.com, and would love to talk to any of you about that. How's that, Duran?
That was fantastic, Chris. Really well done. Thank you so much. I noticed that Kat says you have another event you need to go to, so please don't take it personally if Kat has to step out. She, as you could see, wears many hats.
And if you guys can save the chat, I'd love to have the chance to go through all your comments. It really helps us a lot to know.
We will definitely do that. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. Everybody say goodbye to Kat. Hopefully we'll see you again soon, Kat.
Yeah, thank you everybody very much.
All right, much appreciated. So I'd like to move on with our peer-to-peer. Natasha, why don't you tell us, you work in co-working, good, bad, coming out of the pandemic. What do you see? How much of that can you cover in a minute?
Well, thank you for that. Yes, co-working took a big hit during the pandemic. Shared workspace, not such a good thing. So I did end up closing half the business, which was the kind of communal open space. But I kept the other half of the business, which was the private offices. Actually, that's the building that we have on. It's solar powered. We're putting in an EV charging station. And it has all individual offices, which is very helpful in a pandemic. The nice thing about that is that it's much more self-sufficient as well. And so it's freed up a lot of my time to do other work in Petaluma. So a lot of the work I'm doing is around climate action and the general plan update we're doing right now. So I'm excited to be doing that. Business-wise, I think co-working will come back as everybody gets tired of working at home, but it's gonna be a little while before it's a viable business model for the density you need in a shared space. So holding off on that.
Well, thank you for that, Natasha.
Yeah,
and certainly,
thank you for this.
Yes, no worries. Certainly coming out of the pandemic, I mean, I could see potential opportunities for co-working as so many organizations have closed their offices. So as we all start to get our vaccines, I'm one shot down, one to go, and hope that everyone, all right, hope that everyone can start to gather again in person sometime soon, including in co-working. Next, I'd like to call on Erica Torgensen, who can give us a little update on Sonoma Clean Power. Hi, Erica.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for that. Actually, we're really excited because we have launched the online version of our Advanced Energy Center. Many of you probably have seen it's been under construction on 4th Street in downtown Santa Rosa in the old Stan Ray Music Building for over a year now. But so we're really excited to open that later in April. But in the meantime, if you visit scpadvancedenergycenter.org, we have tons of energy efficiency equipment available with 0% financing and all the kind of industry knowledge you need to help you get started. It matches you with a contractor who's been through our training program, and it also has incentives and discounts from both us and the manufacturers. So I will put the website in the chat, but we're really excited. It just launched.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You guys have been getting a lot done despite all the challenges, and we really appreciate that. I am going to call on some of the guests, but I want to call on our members first. I noticed Jeff Mathias just turned on his camera. I'm suspecting that's because he's got something interesting to say. You always do. Jeff, Synergy Solar, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Hang on. There we go. Hey, thanks very much, Ron. Yeah, Synergy Solar, we're still doing a lot of the same stuff, solar and batteries. We're finding that we're not doing anything without batteries anymore just because we want to stabilize the grid. We're looking at resiliency in our area. We're also looking at really trying to cut down on the need for transmission and distribution, as well as some of the rate schedules have gotten pretty crazy. So with that focus, we're putting a lot of electric car charging stations in homes. So again, we're doing a lot of the same old stuff. We're just doing it in a slightly different way with a focus on trying to stabilize the grid and focus on resiliency due to the fires in our area. Thanks, Duran. That's it. Quick and easy.
That was very well done. I'm impressed. So anybody else who wants to speak, just drop a note in the chat. I do want to recognize some of the people who specifically asked. So I'd like to welcome some of our guests now as the As One team. If you guys are still with us, I would love to give you a chance to update us and Solus. No, how about Matthew Gillian? I see you there patiently waiting in your vehicle. It looks like you pulled over somewhere, which is probably a wise move on your part. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, thank you very much. I am pulled over, I am stopped. My nonprofit is Inspiration Transportation. Our mission is to implement sustainable transportation services in underserved communities throughout the San Joaquin Valley. We've currently, over the past 5 months, starting in October, we rolled out a pilot project in the community of West Park, which sits just outside the Fresno City boundaries, as well as in Biola. Providing, again, A to B services in electric vehicles, mainly to employment, medical appointments, and some grocery store shopping needs, as those are both food deserts. That's what we're doing right now. We're looking to, in the next couple of months, launching services in the city of Fresno, primarily in Southwest Fresno, in communities that Dr. Denise Curry is so prevalent in. And the sort of broad scope, which lends to what Ms. Taylor was talking about in regards to community ownership, what I would love to be able to see is we start to put down hubs of fleets of electric vehicles in these low-income communities, so we can start to even shift the mindset of car ownership, so that there are enough community access vehicles, electric vehicles, so that folks in low-income communities don't have to think about owning 1, 2, or multiple vehicles. So that's my little soapbox there, and Inspiration Transportation, iTransportEV.com.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for the work you do in the Central Valley and in Fresno. And thank you
SB 617.
for joining us here today. I see
know
someone's.
you know.
Jeff, are you speaking to us, or do you just need to mute? Oh, there you go. He just needed to mute. All right, no worries. We're all learning how this works. We have a couple more folks who have something that they want to share with us. I'd like to call on Insolus in the As One group. I believe you guys are available now to make a comment. Please go ahead. Tell us who you are.
Hello, everyone. We are Insolus. We are here out of Fresno, California, and I'm here with Carlos, who is the inventor. We're partnering up together, and this is Lawrence Penner, that we would like to talk a little bit about Insolus and what we do in the energy field.
Okay. Real quick, I just want to give you a little synopsis of who we are. Basically, we are a thermal insulation company, and we have chosen the roofing industry as a vehicle to promote the energy reduction. We are, it's hard just to give you a quick synopsis of who we are in a very short platform here. We use the reduction of heat transfer as a method to save energy. It's like putting an umbrella over your house so that the energy does not penetrate through the roof into the attic, because currently right now, all the insulation is basically put at the ceiling level so that all the energy coming into the house resides in the cavity, in the plenum, in the roofing in there. And also that's where the air conditioning units and all the pipes are, so everything remains hot. We have, with all our testing, and we have many installations primarily in the Southern California market. And when an attic is 140 degrees, if you install our product over the top of the roof, we reduce your attic temperature to 90 degrees inside the attic. This calculates into a 30 to 35% reduction of energy usage by a residential home. This also equates to about a 50% utility reduction in the client's cost in their bill. It cuts their bill right in half. So we have chosen this method as a way to reduce the use of energy without changing the lifestyle of the current residential homeowner. And we are also very lightweight. We are half the weight of the current concrete tile and clay tiles. Therefore, we ship twice as much material per truckload, which reduces the carbon footprint in transportation. We also, again, we work very closely with the California Energy Commission. As a matter of fact, they established a new part of their program for their CPEC res, which they use to calculate the energy usage. And it's called insulated roof tile. That was because of us. And this way they can calculate the energy use. I'll be done in just a second. The energy usage, they can calculate it before the house is currently built. One last thing, there are probably over 13 million homes in the state of California, residential homes, and many of them were built before 1976, and they're poorly insulated. And that's where all that energy is going. And if we were able to reduce their usage, all that energy could be moved to public transportation, which we want to support public transportation throughout all our cities in the state of California. That energy production that is currently going into those homes could go to the cities, and this could reduce our usage of energy, and we could be part of the solution in this energy crisis and the reduction of pollution.
Thank you so much. I applaud the work you're doing, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join us here today. And I'm glad we got to hear a little bit about your work. Hopefully we'll be able to work more together in the future. And of course, energy saved is energy created. We talk about negawatts, right? So anti-watts. So that's wonderful. I've got just a couple more folks I know want to speak. Andrew Cameron, one of our members, EPR squared, I believe. Go ahead. Why don't you give us a brief update?
Sure. Just a quick, what we do, we're providing distributed solutions to the commercial property space with energy rights collateral as the financing. It's an alternative to PPAs, PACE, and lease financing. And just wanted to let everybody know it's going well. We are looking at about a 10x growth this year over last year in just this first quarter alone. So lots of good growth in the commercial distributed space. Thank you, Duran.
Thank you, Andrew. Really appreciate you being here and for your continued membership in our organization and our business network. Our last little update is going to come from Ruben Aronin down at the Better World Group, working with Cecilia Estelona. He's got some updates for us on policy. And so go ahead, Ruben, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thanks so much. And thanks again for having the Better World Group with you this morning. Great to learn about all of the robust business activities that your network is pursuing. I just wanted to give a little more color commentary on what Cecilia mentioned at the top of the call, and that is this campaign that we're helping to stand up among a broad, diverse advocacy coalition of environmental justice, health, environmental and business organizations, associations, and would welcome everyone on this call to get involved in one way or another. The governor put forward a $1.5 billion budget proposal. $1 billion of that would be for infrastructure investments that are needed to really bring forward the zero emission transportation future in light and heavy duty vehicles. And then the other roughly $500 million would be for incentives for medium and heavy duty vehicles and for some of the programs that Kat flagged for making sure that we can continue robust equity programs to get the cash for clunkers type of programs robustly funded and make sure that these vehicles are accessible to frontline communities. So this is a hard lift because it's a 2/3 vote that's required by the legislature to reauthorize AB8, which is a fee that produces the funding for a lot of these investments. And that means that there's a lot of work to do to educate legislators, and we're needing to hit all of them up to prioritize this amidst all of the other issues that Sacramento's dealing with. We think it's one of the most critical issues to pave the way for other legislative and regulatory priorities that I know the Climate Center shares as well. So anyone who's interested, you can hit me up, Ruben, RUBEN, at betterworldgroup.com, or just reply to Daron. He can get me in touch with me, of course, as well. But the time frame for this is the legislature has to vote on it by mid-June. So it's a short, aggressive timetable for unlocking a lot of state investment that will leverage private investment in this space. So thanks for the opportunity to flag this issue for y'all.
Thank you so much, Ruben, and thank you for everything you guys do in Southern California and indeed around the state. Both of our organizations are working, you might say, border to border, from the coast to the mountains, and it's going to take a sort of a complete group effort to make this heavy lift to get to a climate safe California. I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm going to end this in just about another minute. Peter and Chris and Natasha and Marissa and everybody else who came here, thank you so much for being a part of this meeting. I want to remind you of just a couple of things. Our Climate Safe California webinar series continues. Our next one on clean mobility, as I said, is April 28th. I'm going to ask Barry, if you wouldn't mind, to drop the link to that registration into the chat one more time. Climate Safe California still is looking for endorsements. We're always trying to grow our coalition. I did note that some of you actually endorsed during this meeting, so I thank you for that. You can endorse both personally and as an organization. So if you are able to do so, we encourage you to do so. And again, this is something we're all going to be working on together. We're looking to grow this business network. If you know of other folks who might be interested in joining you as a paying member of this network, please do refer them to us. We'd love to have that conversation with any of you who are here as guests today also. Our next meeting will be in June, probably in this format again. We love the opportunity to connect with people in Fresno and Southern California. And that's actually one of the things that's been wonderful about this horrible pandemic is that we do stuff virtually. And as frustrating as it is, it also gives us the opportunity to connect with people in a much broader geographic area much more easily. So we will continue to do these, but we do look forward to gathering again in person somewhere here in the North Bay. Maybe we'll do a meeting down in Fresno or in Southern California in the future. Our first in-person meeting will probably be back here in Northern California, pardon me, probably in the fall, depending on how the numbers go and the vaccinations go and everything else. So we don't want to promise anything, but that's our hope that by that point we can gather together in person. We'll see. Either way, we will keep in touch. We look forward to continuing to work with all of you and really applaud everybody for the important work that you're doing as a part of getting us to a climate safe California. So thanks again for being here. We really appreciate you all very much. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks so much and bye-bye. Great.